these days.
Okay. Because I prepared everything, so now I think it started. Okay. So we are live now on YouTube as well. So welcome everyone to the Strategy Design Sprint meetup. So we are here at the official Google Design Sprint chapter in Stuttgart. And I welcome all of you. I'm really amazed about the number of people. So I see we are nearly 100 people. And to be honest, I don't know how many people we can host. So I hope that everyone will have a seat as well. So yeah, I'm really...
Alen, you broke the internet.
Okay, so yeah, I welcome you, and we are your hosts. So Orit and me, we will host the session, and I just want to introduce myself, and then hand it over to Orit, and then to Alen. So I'm located here in Stuttgart, and I'm the founder of the Design Sprint Studio. I'm running and training design sprints and talent sprints, which is also a kind of design sprint related new way of recruiting talents. And I'm really passionate to help all of you to learn more about design sprints. And therefore, I'm running frequently these meetups. I'm really happy to do that. And I'm also running Monday morning sessions. And I'm also a host of the community on Mighty Network, the Beyond Design Sprint. So please join me there. You will find everything on the mural board. So we have prepared a mural board where you find everything about Alen, about Orit and me, and you can also connect with each other. So this is also something we're really happy that we have AirMeet now to connect also all of you, because I think there is a real value. And you can do that also on the mural board. I will share that in a second here in the chat. So you can just go to the mural board, you put your LinkedIn there, and then you can connect with each other. And maybe some of you attended already the last meetup with Marco Velasco. We already talked about strategy design sprint, and that's something we are really happy to have Alen here. So we are looking into different perspectives of how to run a strategy design sprint. And last time we were talking about Marco's concept about the playing to win and design sprint mix. And Marco is running them frequently. He's doing everything in Spanish. And I'm really happy to tell you that he invited me to translate everything in English. So we will partner up and we will host a mastermind program in March. So if you're interested, you find everything on the mural board. Just send me a DM, call me, and you will find out more there. And today we are really excited to welcome Alen, and he is the founder of the Design MBA. And he's a business design expert and a wonderful teacher. And Orit and me, we already attended his program last year, and that was really fantastic. So for me, that created a lot of value because I could close some gaps between what I knew already as a strategic designer and, let's say, the whole strategy, how to create a strategy and business models. So that was really valuable. So before I start, I would like to tell you that we will stream and we will record this session. You are able also to ask questions. So when Alen finished his keynote, you are able to ask questions. We can also get you on stage. And after the whole session, we go back to the lounge and we will just continue networking and talking about what we learned and what we are so amazed about. We are nearly 100 people. I'm so happy. And I hand it over to Orit. So please introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. I'm Marie. I'm from Tel Aviv, and I'm a partner at Red ID. And also, we're big sprinters, and we have the Design Sprint Israel community. Yo! And woo! And yeah, like Sabrina said, we took the MBA. It was super interesting because we felt like we're missing that part of the puzzle, And and from the beginning, the reason we went to design sprints was because design thinking, which I loved, just took too long, and it was just like something that was, it didn't fit the pace of the market of the, people that we were working with. And so we're like, okay, how does this fit like in a short amount of time so that like we don't miss the market? And then Alen came up with this article and we're like, all right, come on, talk about it. So we're really excited, Alen.
Yeah, thanks both
Go
of you
ahead.
for inviting me. First of all, you were great students, one of the best. And I remember even when we were during the program, we talked a lot about how can we apply these business principles to sprints. And I remember creating the first version with you, the first Google Doc that outlined kind of the process. And now, like a few weeks back, I decided to publish a more thorough version, and I guess that's why I'm here. I think the easiest way would be if I just start sharing the screen and I'll just explain the whole story and also introduce myself. Since I'm using AirMeet for the first time, let's just see if I can figure this out quickly.
It's that little arrow.
Yeah, but my browser now is not permitted to share the screen.
Give him permission, and I would like, so then in between, I just ask a question because we have the possibility to make calls. And since we don't see you and you cannot raise your hand like this, we want to ask you who knows about design sprint, because I think we have a lot of experts here, but maybe also some beginners. So let me ask you, So I just type it here. I start the vote. So you should be able now so you will see that. Oh, that's great. We have like 90%. Yes, 90%, more than 90% know about the design sprint. So I'm really amazed. Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. I didn't know. So I was thinking about just adding some slides and to explain what is the design sprint, just to give a little bit of context. But let's say now 12% don't know about the design sprint, but I think for sure you will just find out. So hit me just a message. Ask me. Just we will give you all the informations you need. So join the group. Alen?
By the way, Sabrina and Ori, I just need to restart my Chrome so that I actually enable this thing. So give me a minute, okay?
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
So I just need to drop off.
So I think we are all in the same boat. We are trying. And I think that's also nice that we really are able to try new things. And therefore, we give you with this AirMeet, I think, a really new networking experience. Maybe Orit. Oh, I cannot hear you anymore.
Okay, I said, so we did the last one on Zoom and we're trying this one out and having a little bit of technical stuff. But so Sabrina, maybe just for the 12%, just give them until Alen comes back on, like a little 5-minute intro on what that is. So for the 12%.
Okay, let's do it together. So I start, you continue. So
okay.
Is a framework. It's a combination of, there's a lot of design thinking, lean startup, and agile elements in it. And it is to go with a team from a vague idea to a tested high fidelity prototype, and you test it with the real users in the end. And let's say everything in between a week. All right. Please.
Yeah. So instead, the idea is instead of developing the product and putting it on the market and getting feedback, you will develop something that you will create a prototype of something that you think that's what you want to build, and then you show it to the market in 5 days. So that's the big idea there. So, and so when Alan's talking about the strategy sprint, he's also talking about taking a process that would normally take months and condensing it into a few days. So that's why.
And also, not only that it's condensed, but you enable a team of people to do it.
Oh, there it is. Yay. Woo.
Hey.
Okay. Back to me.
So you can see that, right?
So now we mute ourselves and yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm guessing you can see my screen because the only thing I see is just now the slide itself. Okay, perfect. So let's get into it. I mean, you're the crowd that knows this best. So design sprints have become enormously popular. And as Sabrina told you, I'm a business designer. So I was always kind of curious into how this format that's so popular and also easily understood by the audience. So the audience that is buying it, so the managers and the companies, how could we apply these to the business work? And I was particularly always intrigued by the strategy, so the strategic work, because a lot of designers are creating more high-level work, more strategic work. So it just felt like a worthy project to try to fit these two together. But you may feel like a strategy is a really complex topic that takes time to design and test. How could it even fit into sprint format? And that's a good question. But actually, designing strategy might feel like a big imposing topic that takes months to design and implement, but actually the core of the strategic idea, which I will talk about in a bit, can be designed and tested in just a few days. And that's the big premise of this whole format. There's just one disclaimer I want to make before we get into it. Whatever I talk about this today, just please see it as a first draft or something we can design together. What is here is basically an open source format, which you can freely adapt, change, sell, whatever, do with it whatever you want to. It is basically based on my experience working as a consultant at IDEO, working with Fortune 500 companies, where I had to, on certain strategic projects, use ideas that are now presented in this format. Now, I have to be completely honest that I haven't run a strategy design sprint in this format before. The reason I am even putting it before you is that we test it out together. So it's based on the projects that I've done, which were longer, usually a few, like 6 to 8 weeks. But my strategic part, which I'm showing today, was usually shorter. And this is my attempt to try to put it in the format that would make sense for the design, for the strategy design sprint. Yeah, so let's design it together. Whatever I talk about today is a proposal. It's a template that we can together shape. So briefly, Sabrina and Orit introduced me, but for those who don't know, I will go maybe just a little bit more into detail. So as I said before, I'm a business designer and I used to work in an agency called IDEO as a business designer. So what I basically did there was when we worked in these multidisciplinary teams, I took care of the business side of our projects. I was designing strategy, I was designing pricing, business models, etc. So I was basically taking the design mindset and applying it to business topics such as strategy. After that, I founded the DMBA as a response to this huge gap that we have between business and design communities. We just speak different languages. And I've seen firsthand how limiting that can be to our work. Partially it's because of the language, partially also because of certain skills that we lack as a community. So what the DMBA does is basically provides thoughtful business education, so business skills while still honoring the very thing that makes us designers, empathy. So twice a year we organize this 6-week online part-time course. Good. So everything that I talk about today basically is already explained in a guide that you can also find on our website called d.mba/guides. So no need to take any notes. You can find everything and even more probably than I will talk about today in that guide. So before we dive into the format, Let's first talk about what is strategy. So I was a part of one of the tables in the 15 minutes before we went into now this main part or the presentation part of the meetup. And what I noticed, because in our group we discussed basically how different people already run their strategy sprints. And what I'm seeing there is that everybody has a different understanding of what strategy is. So I guess I have to start with it. And I also need to start with it because strategy is one of the most commonly misused words in business and design. And it just hurts me. So the way it's usually used is that, or some people use it as we almost use it as a high level approach to things. So you may say, hey, we need a more strategic approach or a different strategy for attracting talent. Another people use it as a synonym for a more structured approach. They say, hey, let's strategically approach these and first create a plan instead of just doing something. So in the business context, all of these uses are simply wrong because strategy in the business world has a very, very specific definition. And in the most simple terms, strategy is making hard decisions about what we will do and what we will not do. So the key word here is trade-off decisions. So these are the choices, these are the decisions that basically make us choose between X and Y. And we can't do both. So in a strategy, we are particularly looking for the trade-off decisions, and then we are making a choice between X or Y. So let me explain this with a couple of examples. The first one we're all very familiar with. This is Google versus Apple. Hugely successful companies, and they're successful exactly because of their strategy, which makes them so different. So what we have on one side is Google. So, and it's Android software, right? So Android is a good example of basically the whole philosophy of Android is software first. And what they're trying to do is make a software that is very compatible with different devices. It's being used by Samsung, HTC, Sony, LG, etc. Basically by almost everyone who is not Apple. So this means that they have a huge advantage in distribution, but at the same time, this means that it's much harder for Google to actually control the quality of the experience because you have different sizes of the screen, you have different hardware. It's just by definition harder. On the other side, we have Apple. So Apple basically, I think my slides, okay, here it is. So Apple has made a very conscious decision to basically let its operating system only work with Apple devices. And this limits their distribution a lot, but at the same time, it increases their product quality because they can control over all the variables, right? So here's already one very important trade-off. So what we could do or how we could basically explain it is by saying that on one side we have distribution and compatibility. So that's what Google has chosen. And on the other side, we have quality control and premiumness on the Apple side, right? So this is an example of a trade-off because it's impossible to do both. You can't have huge distribution that works on many different devices and not give up some of the quality control and vice versa. And that's the whole thing of strategy. We're looking for these decisions that actually make us choose one thing. And what is very important is that once you start identifying these decisions, you will notice that how many times we try to do both. We try to be this thing in the middle. And I will talk about the pitfall of that a bit later. But first, let's go to the second example, which is a really interesting example coming from the car design. So size and speed are our typical trade-offs in car design. So cars that are bigger are just heavier. And that makes them slower, but at the same time, they have much more space, which makes them more spacious, obviously, but also we can put much more comfortable features in it, like air conditioning, pockets of space, etc. On the other side, we have sports car, which are usually just small and light, because that allows them to be fast. That allows them to have very fast acceleration, high top speeds. And when you go to the extremes, right, you again have very, very successful companies. We have on one side Ford F-150, one of the most popular cars in the US. And on the other side, we have Porsche, which is one of the most profitable car companies in the world. And what you start noticing after you really understand the strategy is that the companies that do really, really well are on the fringes. They make very specific and conscious trade-off decisions, and they lean into them. They don't try to do both, right? Because you can always try to do both, but then you're stuck in the middle, and it's not clear actually what your identity is. So the big story here is that actually strategy is choosing what to do and what not to do. So we're looking for these trade-off decisions, and that is the most important aspect of the whole strategy, right? We're looking for trade-offs. And I think the best analogy that I have found for this is basically climbing mountains. So when you're climbing a mountain, when you're hiking, you basically need to make a decision which mountain you're trying to climb, because you can't try to climb two mountains at the same time. You would just get stuck in the valley. And in business, it's the same. And that's what's happening to a lot of the companies. You can even look it up. It's called stuck in the middle problem. So most famously, BlackBerry was stuck somewhere in between a feature phone and a smartphone. And that was basically a big pitfall of BlackBerry. And we have many other examples. So that's what strategy is. It's climbing mountains. We're looking for the mountain to climb. And to give you another example of why this is so important from the business perspective is that what happens in each of these mountains is that the winner on top of the mountain basically takes most of the economic value. So most of the profits, most of the revenue. And once you have most of the revenue or profit, it means you can further invest in features so you can make your product even better. So it's important to find your mountain even before you start climbing, that you're aware of what mountain you're climbing. Good. So I hope this made it clear what a strategy is, because now we will go into the second and third part, because now I want to translate into this format, the format of strategy, design, sprint. And at the end, we will have Q&A, obviously. If you have any questions, I mean, you can always drop them also in the chat. I don't know how that works, Sabrina, for you usually, but we can also take questions in the middle, but I'll just continue and you just interrupt me if you have a different approach.
I just tell you, so we can, you can ask questions, and then we can take people on stage and they can ask their own questions, or we just can take the questions. Let's see how many we have.
Right. Okay. I'll just continue and you interrupt me if we have to stop, if something is super unclear. So prior to running the design sprint, we have to conduct some fundamental business research, which will set us up for a successful strategy sprint. And this is week 0, right? This is before the week where we design and test the strategy. And here we want to do 3 activities. Activities that will help us get the Lego blocks that we need to actually design a strategy. What I will talk about here are 3 business tools, 3 business research tools that you can use. And if you have any, or maybe if you have business education, or if you have any business-minded friends, you may know of more such tools, and feel free to use them. So this is what I consider to be the 3 fundamental ones. So the first activity called competitive arena, the second one value chain, and third one is looking for cost drivers. I just want to quickly stop on the competitive arena and explain that the reason I put recruiting next to it is because after we have conducted the competitive arena, we can already start recruiting our interview respondents for week 1, because on Thursday we will test the strategy, right? But now let's go into these 3 activities we want to do in week 0. So the first one is called competitive arena. So first of all, before diving into designing a strategy, we want to understand the landscape, right? We want to understand who we are competing with in this space. In other words, we want to understand who our direct, indirect, and potential competitors are. Because we want to understand what options our customers have, our users have, when they're deciding who they will hire for their job to be done. So what we do in this middle, in the competitive arena, we put basically the job to be done, and then around it, we put who the competitors in this space are. Because just the mere act of listing out competitors gives us a lot of very useful information to work with. Because let's say that you're working as a car, so you're a designer in a car company. What you typically understand as your competitors are other car companies. But that's actually a very limited view, because if we have somebody who wants to get from point A to point B, they're not just thinking about which car company will I buy or hire. So which car will I buy to get from point A to B? I have other options. I can use the car that I have, or I can use public transportation. Maybe I can use plane, train, carpooling services. It really depends on which is the best for this use case, right? So when we design the customer goal, which is in the middle, the white surface, then we can start basically filling out the other three circles, which help us understand who we compete with. And obviously companies have multitude of jobs to be done that they're trying to solve. So for your specific strategy sprint, you may need to do one of these two things. So if you're working on a very specific product, you can just choose the most important job to be done for that product. It may also be the only one. Or if you're working for, if you're trying to think of the overall strategy for the company, then you try to find a job to be done that's on the right level. So the one that kind of takes most of your use cases into account. And usually this process is iterative. It takes a few tries until we find a arena that makes sense for us. Okay, so that's the first activity, understanding who we're competing with, because that's going to be super important moving forward. Second tool we're going to look at is called value chain. So to design a viable strategy, we really need to understand how products or services get made in arenas. And value chains essentially show us how we turn raw materials into a product and how we deliver this product at the end to the customers, to the users. But you may be asking, why is this even important? Well, understanding the value chain can help us change how our products and services are made. And through that, we can change the strategy and also the value proposition of our product. So the way you basically fill out this generic value chain, so for your case, is that you always start with the generic players. So you think about the suppliers in this space, you think about the producers, distributors, point of sale, and then you end up with the end customer. So let me show you just one example to see what I mean. So this is now a value chain for Shopify. So Shopify basically is a platform that lets customers create their own e-commerce website really quickly. So you can think of it as a Squarespace for e-commerce. In the Shopify's case, so this value chain now looks from the perspective of a customer, right? So if I'm somebody who's selling something on a Shopify, I first need to create my product. So I have certain raw materials. Let's say I'm creating a desk, right? So first I need to buy wood. Then once I have the wood and all the materials, maybe glue, etc., then I need to create my own product, which I will sell through Shopify on the website. Then what we have there in between is also Shopify is hidden. So that's important part of the value chain. So Shopify is an enabler of the brand of the seller, so the customer of the Shopify. Then obviously, and the next step in the value chain is marketing, because we also need to advertise our product somehow. I want to tell people that I have created great desks and chairs, and then they are being bought by the customers. So what's interesting here is that when you do the analysis of the value chain, you can figure out who the strongest player in the value chain is. In this case, actually, it's the players who are in the marketing space. So the Facebooks, that's the same company, Facebook, Instagram, but Google, etc. So they take most of the economic value in this space, which means that, and this usually leads to what is the biggest problem in this space, right? So in this space, it seems that the problem is attention. How do I, as a creator of these beautiful desks and chairs, let people know that I have created them? So what this means for you as a Shopify or your client when you do the strategy sprint is, hey, maybe we want to be in the other part of the value chain. Maybe we need to be there to create more value for our customers. Maybe we need to, or maybe we're doing too much. We need to do less of it, right? So this is just one example for how to do value chain analysis. So that's the second activity. So competitive arena, the first one. The second is understanding the value chain in which we operate. The third one is super, super important. It's analyzing cost drivers. It sounds so dry, but it's one of the most basic, fundamental, and easy things actually to do to improve your strategic thoughts. So while it may seem a minor point, really don't skip this. This is the thing that makes this whole thing work. So we need to understand the costs associated with creating a product or running a business, because strategy is all about choosing what to do or not to do. In other words, it's all about choosing what we invest in and what we don't invest in. And this can be in terms of money, in terms of attention, in terms of resources, time, etc. And these are actually our Lego blocks that we will use later to make decisions what we will invest in and not invest in. So we need to understand the status quo. We need to identify the biggest cost drivers currently for this type of product, or for the product that our company, that our client is creating. So just one example why this is important. Let's say that you are working for an automotive company and you figure out that the raw materials or just steel makes 10 to 15% of the production price. So this is a huge relative cost. So it means that if we make smaller cars, we can sell them cheaper. So now all of a sudden this becomes a very interesting design, actionable information for design, because okay, now we understand that actually if we make cars smaller, they can be cheaper. Is this interesting to our target group that we are targeting? Is this something we should explore, etc.? So how do we analyze cost drivers? So the very first thing we can do, and you can find more instructions also on the guide, which I mentioned in the beginning. So you can go through annual reports, and there in the annual reports you can find the buckets of costs associated with certain companies. This is only unfortunately available for public companies. So if you have a smaller private company, you won't be able to do that. So you go to step 2. So you can always talk. So this is what we're so great at, designers. So empathy, interviews, we can just use the same knowledge, just apply it to different stakeholders. So not to our users, but to our clients and managers. So we can talk to the arena and industry experts to understand what are the biggest cost drivers for this type of product, right? And knowing their relative size is also very helpful. If we know that steel is 15% and work, so putting the car together is, let's say, 10%, we now have a lot of information to work with. The third thing we can do is we can build on our own experience. A lot of the times, even as a customer, just by looking at the company from the outside, make certain judgments of what they invest in. So you can obviously see that Volvo, for example, is investing much more in safety than, I don't know, Renault is. And lastly, sorry, I just talked about judging from customer POV, which is the final point. Building on our experience, it means that sometimes we have been in this space for so long that we just know what the biggest cost drivers are, and we can just use that to help us with analysis. So here at the end of this step, we want to know biggest cost drivers and their relative size to each other. And this concludes week 0. So at this step, we have all the building blocks that take us into week 1, which is the week where we want to design and test our strategy. So we have 5 days, obviously. Again, the slide is taking some time to load, but I'll just nevertheless start speaking. There it is. Okay, so basically what we want to do on Monday is prepare our most important tool. Then on Tuesday, we want to identify the trade-offs. So we mentioned in the beginning that trade-off is the whole core thing of the strategy. Then on Wednesday, we want to create these prototypes because you may still be asking, how can I turn the trade-off into something that I can test? And then on Thursday, we test it. And then on Friday, we wrap results by baking them back into the canvas. So it starts and ends with the most fundamental tool of week 1, which is this strategy canvas, which I will talk about right now. Okay, so this is the tool for week 1. So what strategy canvas does, it tells us how strategic groups in this space already compete against each other. In other words, what they invest in and how much of money they invest in something. So you can see that canvas basically consists of 2 axes. So on the x-axis on the bottom, you can see so-called competing factors, or what we call strategy activities. So these are all the cost drivers. So remember what we did in week 0? These are the cost drivers that increase our cost structure of the company. So what we have here on the right-hand side is an example for airlines. What they invest in is things like hub. So, a lot of airlines have a central hub. It means you need to have a lot of real estate. You need to have a lot of, how are they called? These huge buildings where you maintain and store your aircraft. Then there's investments related to lounges, investment related to meals, and there's a lot of time and resources into preparing these meals, a lot of space on the airplane. Then we also have certain things like friendly services, speed, etc. I'll talk about it maybe at the end where it kind of gets together, so you will then better understand why those things are in the bottom, why they're relevant for this specific case. But nevertheless, they are always the cost drivers, things that increase our costs in the company. Usually they're 8 to 12. We shouldn't have more on that. And if you have more, then we need to group them together into smaller buckets. And on the y-axis, right, we have the level of investment in each of these cost drivers. So what you have typically at the end of Monday, so day 1, is you want to have these lines drawn. You want to understand where each of these strategic groups is, what they're investing in and how much. So for a moment, just please forget about the red line, and let's just have a look at the yellow and blue. So what the yellow and blue line tell you is basically how much a car versus a typical traditional airline are investing into certain factors. So obviously, airlines have hubs, cars don't. Airlines have lounges, cars don't, etc. Right? So you can see these two strategic choices that from the perspective of a customer you have. And the way you can read these is, I, as a customer, if I'm choosing between an average airline and a car transport, I'm basically deciding between having something that's a little bit more expensive and probably a little bit more comfortable. There's a meal, there's a lounge, and it's faster, right? Or I take a car. It's going to be much, much cheaper. I'm going to have less features like meals, etc. I can still get a meal on the highway, etc. But in terms of the strategic option, it doesn't come with that. So one option, much more expensive but faster. The second option is much more cheaper, and that's why it takes longer. And what you will see on the Friday is how Southwest Airlines has actually tried to do both. So at the price of a car transport actually gets you very fast somewhere. Okay, so again, Monday, super important is to just draw the status quo, what is happening with the strategic groups of the alternatives that a customer has in this space. On Tuesday, what we want to do is identify our trade-offs. So today, Tuesday, we're looking for the 3 to 5 most important trade-offs in this space. Things we feel like are interesting X or Y choices. So we're looking for investments that have the largest potential to create unique value on the market, right? Let me give you an example here we have from the bank industry. So on the left-hand side, we have the traditional bank. On the right-hand side, we have the digital bank, the N26. If you're not familiar with N26, maybe you've heard of Revolut. So it's digital-only bank. So basically trade-off here that they have done. So the digital banks have decided to not have retail presence. And because of that, they have lowered their cost structure so much that they actually offer the banking services for free, right? So this is the big trade-off here. It is retail presence, lowering our cost structure hugely, hugely down. And then what happens is we can offer our services for free, and we can take all of that money we have saved and split it over to the customer. So because now the account is for free, plus we will make much better UX, much better digital UX for our customers using the digital banking services, right? And you can also start seeing how the target group that you choose has a lot to do with the trade-offs. Because for certain target groups, the retail presence is going to be so important they will not be willing to make this trade-off. But certain target groups, such as millennials, are very happy to make this trade-off. They don't know why they're paying for the retail presence of the bank because they hate going there. They're very happy with the Revolut, with N26, most of the times probably, but that's a trade-off they're willing to make. So we're looking for these type of pairs, right? Like we had before with the speed and the size, and what else did we have with the first one? Compatibility versus quality control, right? These are the kind of the trade-offs we're looking for. Every project, every specific arena is going to have different trade-offs. Now, on Wednesday, we want to create basically prototypes and get ready for interviews. So this is now, how do you translate strategy into something you can test? So here we have one example of a project for hotel industry. So one of the trade-offs you may have as a hotel is, do we invest money in the room size, or let's say we can't do both, right? That's the big thing, is we're always limited with resources. So we can either have very large rooms, but not so great bed quality, or we can have small rooms, but great sleeping environment, perfect mattress, everything you can imagine, everything that you want to have in your bed. But the room is very small. So now what we have done is we have turned this trade-off into a visual scenario. We have these two photos, and basically this is how we will test it on Thursday. We will show this to the users, to the interviewers, and we will basically ask them to choose one of these two options. And when we present these options, it's very, very important that we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both. You don't want to just say, this is a bad quality and this is a good quality. So this is better, this is worse. You always have to explain the pros and cons of each option. And this is the definition of trade-off. There's always pros and cons of each option. So in this case, we could say, hey, we're thinking of creating a hotel. We could put it in the city center, but then the rooms are going to be much, much smaller, but we will invest heavily in the sleeping environment. And then you can show them the photos of the bed, etc., right? Or we can have huge rooms, and then you will have a gym, you will have all the amenities you can think of, restaurants, everything, but it will be outside of city center. Which one will you choose? Again, if I'm talking to business travelers, they will probably take the city center location with smaller room. They're not in their room that much, so this is a perfect trade-off they're willing to make. If maybe we talk about somebody who is, let's say, moving to a certain city, so you have a target group of short-term stays, mid-term stays, let's call them, a few weeks, but not just a few days. So maybe people looking for their next accommodation, etc. So maybe those are not willing to make this trade-off, and they want to have a bigger room, and they're okay with lower quality bed, right? So this is one example. So you can have a visual scenario such as this. Sometimes if you're testing brands or like certain brand actions, you can just have mood boards. If it's a physical product, you can have cardboards. If it's an experience, you can actually test this experience. So when people come in, you can maybe create in two different rooms, create two different scenarios. Like if we would be testing the trade-off of the retail presence versus free account with premium digital experience, we could actually in one room have the retail presence and ask our interviewees to conduct a certain task to finish this task, or in another room we give them a phone and they try to finish it on their phone. And through that we can learn a lot about their preferences and especially the trade-off. So the most important thing we want to do in the interview is make them choose one or the other thing. So we want to understand if they're willing to make the trade-off and which thing they're choosing. Right? Super, super important thing, because this will lead everything else. You want to find an interesting trade-off for a certain target group. Okay, so this is Wednesday and Thursday, so creating prototypes and actually having interviews. So I'm assuming that most of you are very, very fluent in actually conducting interviews, in preparing discussion guides. So I will just skip that, and this is well documented also in the design sprint book and other design research books. So now let's go into Friday. So how does this all come together? Remember before I told you to forget the red line? So actually the red line, from the perspective of this canvas, if we would be working for Southwest Airlines, so for those of you who are not familiar, it's a low-cost airline from the US. It's very similar to EasyJet or Ryanair, or maybe to AirAsia in Asia. And so on Friday, we would draw our red line, because on Monday, we will only have the blue and the yellow one, because that's the status quo. And then after we have conducted interviews, we would be willing to, we would have enough information to actually make our choice. So what you can see here is that, let's just imagine that we have done an interview, and one of the traders we have shown to our interviewers was, hey, what we're thinking of, you have two options. So you can get a great airline meal, or you can have a lower price. Which one would you choose, right? So that's already an example of one trade-off, which we can use later to make our decision. And in this case, let's just imagine that we have actually found out that people are more than happy to not get the meal on the flight and pay less for that. So this, you can see basically here, we have decreased the investment vis-a-vis all other airlines in the meals, because now we're not preparing hot meals anymore, we are selling them. So instead of them being cost driver, now they are revenue for us. And all the savings we have from not creating the meals, now we can invest in something else. We can invest in friendly service, we can invest in speed and frequent point-to-point departure. I'll get to that in a bit, right? But what you can see is how these decisions then start showing in our canvas. So what is very important is that the line of the draw, the way, it's kind of a litmus test if you really created a strategy, a new strategy or not, is that this line needs to be divergent from the already existing lines. If it's something that follows another option on the market, then you didn't really create a strategy, you just copied what is there. So what we get after we have drawn this canvas is a really basic document. So even if you don't do this canvas, which I would still suggest, but what you can still do is a very simple document that shows the do's and don'ts. Going back to the very beginning, we said that strategy is all about making decisions of what we will do and what we will not do. So now after we have conducted the research, we have to be very clear with our do's and don'ts, right? And this can be a very simple paper with just list of activities, investments we are now willing to make and not willing to make. So what has Southwest Airline done? So the stuff they had decided to do is actually, okay, we will only sell our tickets direct to consumers. Oh, we want to lower the prices, so we want to cut the intermediaries. We want to cut the middlemen out, so we will sell them only direct to consumers. And you can see this choice with all of the low-cost airlines these days. You basically just buy them directly with them. Then the second do is that we will only sell food. We don't offer it for free. So it's not a cost driver anymore. It's a revenue generator. This means also much less time is needed. So by the time you land, and then when you have to turn back to your destination, so turn the plane around and fly back to the origin or to another location, if you don't have to deal with food, you need less time, which means your plane is in the air more time, which means actually that, again, the utilization of your asset, which is the plane, is higher, which is better from the business perspective. And then with a lower price, you can basically give this advantage also to the customer, right? So if you utilize your assets as a company better, you can offer the lower price to the consumer. The next do we have decided to do as a Southwest Airline is frequent point-to-point departures. Maybe you remember that one of the things on the canvas there was a hub, right? So the way usually the average airlines do their business is that they have a central hub. Like Lufthansa has one in Frankfurt, one in Munich, Air France has one in Paris, etc. And what they do is they fly you from your location to Paris or Frankfurt, and then from there to your final destination. But if you start in Frankfurt or Munich, that's fine. But if you're starting elsewhere, like maybe if you're starting your journey in Leipzig, you first have to fly to Frankfurt to get your end destination, right? This is hub and spoke system. And now what the low-cost airlines do is they don't have a hub. So again, lower cost structure. But now they turned this into their advantage because they decided they will fly frequently from point to point. So they usually connect these less popular airports directly, right? So now you can fly from Leipzig maybe to I don't know, Mallorca, okay, which usually wouldn't be possible because Lufthansa and other airlines would take you from a smaller city for German standards, from Leipzig to Frankfurt, then from Frankfurt to Mallorca. But what the low-cost airlines do is they connect you directly. And if you also think about your low-cost journeys, you will see that sometimes this is exactly what they do. And that's their strategy. And this is being allowed by this decision to not have a hub, right? And last, very, very interesting is they're flying all their journeys. I don't know how that's called, routes, I think. They're flying all of them basically with the same aircraft. This is actually a very famous business decision. If you look it up, why Southwest Airlines is only flying 737 Boeing. It has a lot of advantages. One of them is training, right? You don't have to train your crew for a specific aircraft because everybody's used to just one 737. Second advantage is that now you can negotiate better with Boeing because you will get lower price, etc. And then on the right-hand side, we put all the decisions we will not do. So being very conscious, we won't do lounges, we won't do food service, we won't do hub and spoke system, we won't have baggage transfers, we won't sell a class ticket, etc. Interesting thing, and again, you can look it up. A lot of the airlines, when Southwest Airline was created, it was a huge innovation, strategic innovation, but also value proposition innovation. And this is how these two should merge, right? Your strategy should somehow result in a better value proposition. So a lot of the airlines, the average traditional airlines, have tried to copy Southwest Airlines, but by basically doing both, right? So they were still running all these activities, lounges, food, hub, etc. And then they also tried to lower on certain routes their price, and it just didn't work because you can't do it both. Again, it's a trade-off. If you're investing so much money into all of these features, premium features, you can't also have a lower price. So we're looking for these very, very interesting decisions that will make our value proposition defendable. And that's what strategy is. So climbing a very unique mountain and creating a space where we can create a lot of value proposition for the customers and also have a mountain that is defendable, right? Good. I went pretty long actually, so I think it's time to go to the Q&A. I hope it was clear. Again, this is an open source format. I'm very much looking for the feedback also. So the buckets have been tested, but not the whole format. So I don't have to give you like an agenda for the whole week, but I'm very much willing to help those who are trying to go through something like this so we can figure it out also together. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thanks, Alen. I see a lot of hand clappings and thank you here. Thanks, guys. So we can start with the Q&A, and I would start. And I already there, we gathered some questions, and I sort them by upvotes because you can also upvote the questions. So we have, there's something moved to answered already. Yeah. It was about the record. So what are the must-have capabilities? And this one is from, oops, why is that moved to answered as well? No, sorry, there was a question from Jeroen. I saw that, but it's not there anymore. Strange. So how do you determine the strongest player in the value chain? This is from Raluca. I try to put her on stage if I can find her. Luca, would you like to come on stage and just ask your questions?
Alen, your camera is still not working for some reason, or
I see it's working.
You see him? Okay, I don't see him.
Yeah, and Raluca is here as well. Hi, Raluca.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was curious how you determine which is the, where is my question? Yeah. Which is the strongest player in the
Player.
value chain. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you're looking at who in the value chain has the most negotiating power,
Okay.
right? So I'm asking myself, if I would need to negotiate versus that company, would I be able to lower the price? Is
Okay.
that who in the space has unique position, and everybody else is kind of just adjusting to them, and every value chain has a different player that is running the show. So the main question is who has access to a scarce resource, who has the most negotiating power, who is the biggest player sometimes. A proxy for that is the best way to find it is just to talk somebody in who has a lot of experience in the arena.
Okay.
But if you're already like if you're working in-house, then you already have a very good sense. Sometimes it's your company. If it's super successful, it usually is. But sometimes if you're a smaller company, then maybe it's also not you.
Okay. Thank
you. Sure. You're muted, Sabrina.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Now I have Jeroen on stage. Could you please ask your question, Jeroen? Jeroen?
Of course I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we just cannot see you.
Yeah, I don't know why the camera is not working. Oh, here it is. Hello.
No.
Hello, world. Thank you for the clear presentation. I think from a strategy journey point of view, very clear. Also the steps in developing an, let's say, compelling product service towards a business strategy. But putting it into a sprint within 1 week, assuming that the facilitator is not the expert, is not the strategy expert. That's the people in the organization themselves. What core capabilities do you feel need to be at the table during that week to really make this successful within 5 to 7 days?
Yeah. So first of all, as with any strategy, you need to have the person who has the chance to make the decision, right? So if you're creating the top level strategy for the whole company, you do need CEO. If you're creating a product strategy, then you need a person who has the capability to make that choice. So they need to be present on at least Monday and Friday. Okay. So then in terms of your team, the super important thing is you need to have somebody who can visualize the prototypes, right? So if you don't have the capabilities to make it visual, so if you know that your company is a software company, you may need to have interaction designer, somebody who can create a UI. If you have a physical product company, you may need a product designer, a physical product designer to create that prototype in a day. And even if they don't create like a full thing, they can at least create a visual representation of that thing. Maybe it's a 3D model or whatever. So you need somebody who can visualize this thing. So the business capability can come from the client, but it's also definitely to have at least one business-minded designer in the room. It helps, to help build the bridge between the client and the sprint team, right? So you have the facilitator, you have a designer who can visualize this thing, and then you have someone who's a little bit more maybe business-minded designer who can help you with that, if that makes sense. Was that the question, or did I go somewhere else? Like, did I take the wrong route with this? You're muted. You're still muted. You don't seem to be muted, but I can't hear you.
Still muted.
Okay, now it works.
That's work. Sorry, I got dual microphones to avoid background noises. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, the answer. I think the perspective that you sketched to me is that design professionals, as capable as they are in their own profession, can level up their knowledge and therefore bring this service alive to their clients, to organizations. But I would assume that you want to have throughout the design sprint or the strategy sprint also financial experts, marketing experts at the table actually in the process involved, because they need to buy into the strategic direction from the beginning onward. So I was looking more for what business capabilities would you invite in such a journey to make sure that the strategy is successful?
Maybe I can add something to that. I think it's like in a real design sprint, you need to have as many perspectives as possible. And then it depends a bit, because I saw that also in the questions. What kind of strategy are you doing? Is this more kind of a business strategy, like a higher level strategy for the company, or is that more a product strategy? So that then depends on also the people, but it needs to be people who have stakes in it, who are capable to have, let's say, the knowledge that's needed to do this kind of strategy.
Yeah, I would say that I think in terms of the buy-in, it really depends on the brief, who needs to be there. That's something that really project by project basis. In terms of the capability, it may seem like you need a financial expert, but you don't. Like whoever is working within that company, like a product manager or the proxy product manager, will have all the information you need for this for like week 0, definitely, and also the day 1, because that's when you need them the most. That's when kind of the input is the most important. So yeah, you don't need like a super high up financial expert. It's just somebody who can give you the broad strokes of the cost drivers of who is important in this space, of how the products get made. And this is almost anyone within the company who has been there for long enough and has at least like a little bit of eye on the finances. Definitely doesn't have to be a financial person.
Thanks. I would like to invite Taku on stage. He had a question as well. Thanks,
Hi, Taku.
Oops, sorry. How can I change the video? It's so weird now. Sorry, I don't know. Okay, sorry, I don't know how to change. So my question is,
no problem.
If I can use the value chain for non-product, for instance, like when I am analyzing the digital product, then sometimes I don't have a supplier or a distributor. Or maybe like when I'm thinking about the organization, like a design agency, for instance, also like, many parts in the value chain you explained formally is not applicable. So is it only for the product, or can I use it for the different industries?
Yeah, good question. First of all, why are you still awake, Taku? It's 3. How early is it in Japan?
I'm very interested in this strategy sprint, so like I will.
Wow.
Okay.
That's dedicated.
Cool. So, Taku, great question. If you think about the Shopify example, so Shopify is not a physical product; it is a service too, right? So it is equally applicable. It's just the raw materials. It's not physical. It may be something else. For example, for a design agency, the raw material, bluntly speaking, could be people, right? Your freelancers, your in-house or external collaborators. For software, it could be also, you still need some suppliers. Like you may need Amazon, like AWS. You may need, I don't know, a coding company that helps you create this thing. So it is pretty much applicable. It's like you ask yourself, before I create a product, who needs to supply me with something? Whose help do I need before I create a product? And whose help do I need after I create a product? Or am I helping somebody else creating the product, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think like thinking about not only the front stage, but also like analyzing the backstage into the value chain is important to analyze the digital product and also the organization. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. So all these tools, again, I just one thing to say, it's like there's a big division between front-end tools and back-end tools. And I think as designers, we're very much drawn to the front-end tools. Like all the tools that we use, we want to make them very much visible to the client. And sometimes that doesn't have to be the case. You can do Arena or a value chain for yourself at the back end just to know what is happening in this space. And the reason I'm explaining this is because you can adjust these tools also. Like the whole idea of the tool is to help you. And the idea of the value chain is to help you understand how the products and services get made. So if you want to play with it or create a certain variation, go for it.
Thanks. And just to ask the next question, I invite Ram to the stage. And just to explain you, I take it in a row because people upvoted questions. So I take the most important questions here.
Hey, Sabrina. Hey.
Hey, Ram.
Hi. Thank you, Alen, for a great presentation. I'd like to ask about these graphs and also the prototype. What if our trade-offs are not product properties, but more of a business structure or services like Wells Fargo? They focus on running a bank like a business only in the US. So there's a regional strategy and an operational strategy. And how do you structure those lines, and then how do you prototype it?
Yeah. So, I mean, the beauty of the definition that we have, so the trade-off is that you can apply it to any level. It can be applied to a product, it can be applied to the overall business, it can be applied to place, right? It doesn't even have to be product. It can be, do we want to compete in that region? A really interesting example are stores, physical stores that make a trade-off decision to actually be outside of city center because land is cheaper. We can have more space. This means maybe fewer people come, but it's a very famous strategy being used by IKEA and the others. So what I'm trying to tell you is that as long as you keep in mind that strategy is a trade-off, you can apply it to anything. It doesn't even have to be a whole canvas. It can be just one simple decision, right? Okay, but if you do want to use, okay, go ahead.
So your x-axis can be like geography, or then you may have like multiple lines like that.
No, I mean in this case, if you end up using canvas, then you need to with investments. I digressed and tried to explain that the trade-off thinking can also be applied to different things. But to go back to your question, so yeah, if you're using the canvas, the geographies will not really work because there, what we want to have at the bottom are the investment decisions. So if you go from a business to a product level, nothing changes apart from your investment decisions. So what you have at the bottom axis is going to be much more specific. So if you go on an overall business perspective, you will have broader categories. If you go to a more specific product, you can pinpoint much more to that specific product what those investment decisions are.
I think I understood. I think I understood it. And I to my second thing, how would so if, for example, I'll give like a concrete example. So if we're a design agency, we decide not to give UX, UI services anymore and do only design sprints. So how will our prototype look?
Can you tell me the trade-off again?
So trade-off is we get long-term contracts, mainly hourly based value, and design sprint are value based charges, but they are like, we need to nail more deals. So we need to, the trade-off will be less security if we're in a riskier business, and there's
I think here the best prototype would actually be a pitch deck. So you create two different decks that you go out and test with potential clients, and you present both options and basically ask them, which one would you go for and why. Now, what's interesting about this decision is that it has all the implications for the canvas back, right? So like if you go with short-term, fast-paced sprints, your cost structure may change. So instead of actually having full-time employees, you may not need them, right? So maybe what if you lead into this whole idea of having shorter-term projects, and you don't have any. So like maybe what if you go into becoming a community? So you invest in space, not having full-time employees, but you just hire contractors per project basis. So this is how this then is being tied back to this, right? So when you have a prototype, you ask yourself, what are all the implications for investments? If we take it to the extreme, because that's what we want to do, we want to find the climb the mountain to the top.
Thank you.
Is that understandable?
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you.
So I have a next question from Wolfgang Goebel, but he's not there anymore. I cannot find him. So I would just ask Afsul on stage. Afsul. Cannot be invited on stage. Sorry. Maybe I try again. No. Okay. We just ask. I just asked the question here. Let me see, or let me choose someone else who is available. Hannah van Forst. So Hannah, let's try if it works with you. Yeah, I think it works. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, yeah, great, it works. Hi, Alen. Hi, everyone. Alen, first of all, thank you for sharing. It was fun and a pleasure to listen to you. My question is about incumbents, and especially if we've got a business already set up, and we see that our arena changes, and how do we just adapt to it? So how do we change our strategy? How do we move to a different fringe of the trade-off continuum?
Yeah, it's the question. I think the problem here, I think the question you're asking is not even that much about strategy, it's more about change management, or like how does a company that has done things a certain way change the perception of doing things this way. I can tell you from like business perspective how that's done. You have to understand the status quo. The toughest thing is to be aware of the trade-off decisions you have made. Most of the companies are not. So the very first thing is for you to be aware of the trade-offs you have made. And once you are, then it's like the same thing like when you go to a psychologist, you first have to be aware of the problem to solve it. So here is the same. You want to understand the trade-off you have made, and then ask yourself, is this trade-off still helping me or is it limiting me? Now, as a designer, what you can do is you can go out and interview people and actually try to have some information that backs up your recommendation to maybe changing this. Or maybe you can even run a certain prototype to prove that this is working. So that's one thing, right? So you want to be aware of the trade-off and then test it. What is super important to know, though, is that all of these decisions are mutually like, how do you say? They should be mutually supporting, which means that if you have a certain strategy, usually you can't just change one trade-off. Like you usually change a few things to make sense. Like if I am a premium airline, I can't just all of a sudden get rid of lounges. It's just not something that my clients are used to. So it's the question of all of us. And when you have a client and try to help them, in a lot of the cases, it's just easier to create a smaller company that has the freedom to test these new trade-offs, the fringes.
Okay, to just build kind of lighthouse projects and see if it works. Okay.
I mean, in the absence of knowing your company and or your client, I mean, that's on the abstract level what I can say. Sometimes it is easy. Sometimes it's just moving one thing, and actually it works even better. But in most cases, it's hard to make those decisions.
Yeah, but I guess, as you said, awareness and just understanding what the arena is right now and being aware of
100%
is just like the cornerstone.
If I would, I think every project team should have a canvas in their room of the status quo, just to understand. Because a lot of times we are complaining, why did company do that? But like when you have this in your room and you see certain things, everything becomes clearer. Like you understand all the constraints that we have. So even if you don't change anything, just having a status quo is super helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you for your answer.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you, Hannah. And I think we could maybe just answer a last question before we go back to the lounge, and then there's also a possibility to just ask Alen about, let's say, ask him more questions or to discuss what we just heard. So, Orit, would you have one last question? What you saw, or
Yes, I guess on how often you would run these, how often and when you would run these strategy sprints in, especially like in kind of startup situations where it's very dynamic, and and your customers aren't, you're not, you may change some things. So how often would you run them, I guess?
Yeah.
And when?
Yeah. I mean, this is a good question. So strategy ideally is a thing that you don't change every day, because once you decide to climb a certain mountain, you need some time to get to the top. People do say that these days we change strategy all the time, but again, I think strategy is being used different in that sentence. I think overall strategy should stay sound for a longer period. Now,
Well, about how long?
what
That's what I'm saying.
half?
Once a year, or with a
Yeah.
check-in every quarter, or what?
Yeah. No, I'm getting there. It's a layered answer. So this is the first thing. Like, if you're building like an overall business strategy for your startup, for your company, from ground up, you first need to know your overall business strategy. Now, if you're building it for the product, what you will notice is that first you need like an overall directional certainty strategic sprint, just to know which way you want to go. But then once you're in the loop, once you become aware of the trade-offs, you see them everywhere, and then you can just run a sprint just for one specific trade-off. Specific thing. Should we build let me see how I should go with this. Let's say that you have an app, and you need to provide support somehow, right? And you have now two very, very different options. One is we just build the best possible FAQ page that helps people, and we put some chat in there. Or the other one is we have a hotline. We can't do both, right? So chat, it takes a little bit longer, but it's much more scalable for us. Hotline, having calls, it's much more demanding resource-wise, etc. But you get an answer right away. So you can have just this decision being prototyped in the 5 days, but this only makes sense from my perspective once you know what the overall strategy is. So yeah, there's no easy answer. Overall strategy ideally shouldn't change, but as long as the environment changes, you may need to adapt. So I think once you really do it a few times, you will get a very good sense. It's not something you do all the time, but you also could be, because there are so many strategic choices on so many levels if you're a big company. Sorry.
So I would like to end now this session and invite everyone to go to the lounge and to take a seat at the tables, and also you can use the speed networking and just continue talking. We have still some more questions, and I would just make one. I will just copy every question and then try to answer that with Alen, let's say behind the curtain, and then post it. So that's what I could suggest. Okay, so I really want to thank you, Alen. That was a wonderful presentation, and also very interesting questions here. Thanks a lot. And I think, so that's also regarding to a question here. I think now we are also kind of challenged to find the way how to put that together, to try to test it, and everyone is invited to contribute. And I already see I already see a lot of exercises here there. So we will take the challenge, right, Orit? And I hope all of you who are interested in.
Take the challenge and communicate the results and the experience. So, okay. To Alen, especially. That's what you're Alen, where can people, when they do it, where can they give you, where can they share their experience and feedback? You know, because that's what you were promoting, and you were saying like you wanted to hear like their experience once they ran it and stuff. So do you have anything for that, or?
Yeah, I think it's easy if you just find an email. So it's I think it's best hello@d.mba. So HELLO@d.mba. Just put in the title or the subject, design sprint. Yeah, I think that's best. Or just comment under the guide. That's even better because then it's public. But I already know most of you shy away from the public exposure.
Yeah, and we have also everything, your whole contact information on the board, on the mural board, which I shared. And so I will end the session. Thanks a lot, Alen and Orit.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's go to the tables and continue networking. Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you at the table.